Hi everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of How to HR. I hope you're having a fabulous week and it's nice and busy in business for you. I know many people that I'm talking to are currently in the depths of the hiring process, making decisions about bringing new people into their team. There's been loads of activity in that space. So if that's you, hope it's going well. It can be a bit of an overwhelming process, but take your time, get it done properly, get it done thoroughly, and that will pay off for you, absolutely. If you're new to this episode of How to HR, welcome. It's so great to have you here. My name's Kristy-Lee. I'm the director and founder of the Footprint Group, the host of the People Powered Business podcast, and of course the CEO of the Your People Powered Business HR membership for small to medium-sized businesses. It's great to have you here. How to HR is a weekly series each and every Thursday here in Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel, where we bring you a simple strategy, tactic, tip, piece of advice, something that you can take and implement straight into your business that's going to help you build a team, that's going to drive business success, and most importantly, deliver you as the business owner the freedom that you seek in having a business. So you don't have to do all the things, or you don't have to spend all of your days managing your people, because that's not what you got into business for. Now, today's episode, we are talking about a topic I've been learning a lot about in recent months, and something that really fascinates me, and something that I think most of you will possibly shy away from, but I've seen some real benefits in it, and that is transitioning to a 4-day work week. Now, I'm not talking about making all of your full-timers part-time, although I am talking about a reduction in hours. I'm actually talking about rethinking, reimagining the way we treat work and consider work when it comes to our teams. So traditionally, we have been worried about having bums on seats, bodies in an office, people where they need to be to get things done. And we've largely measured a lot that has to do with the success of those people and of our teams generally in terms of those people being present for those periods of time. So you would all be aware that under the Fair Work Act, we have a 38-hour work week. Yet for many of us, we would consider that someone's not really pulling their weight if they're not around 40 to 42 hours a week. And I know I've had discussions with many of you who are here inside our Facebook group around that whole how to make people work extra hours and make it all compliant and legal, because it's a traditional approach that we've taken, and it's an approach that we, as we've grown up in our workplaces, seen that that is the way things are done. In order to be effective, in order to be successful, in order to be productive and efficient, you put the hours in, and you put more hours in. And it's probably something we all did early in our careers in order to rise up through our careers, or to impress our bosses, or because we thought that we were doing the right things. So today's discussion might challenge that thinking a little bit. So I'm not expecting you're all going to run out and implement this straight away, but I wanted to share what's working with other businesses and the results they are seeing, so that you can consider whether or not this is a possibility and even a benefit for your workplace. So the 4-day work week is not a new concept. It's been played with a little bit by various organisations in recent years. And in fact, New Zealand's Prime Minister has suggested that this may be an approach they look to take as a nationwide approach. Now, her view was more in relation to reducing to part-time in order to stimulate the tourism and hospitality economy and to share the load around those who didn't have enough work compared to those who had full-time work. And that's slightly different to some of these organisation-based approaches. But I think the fact that we've got someone like that talking about this, considering whether it's time to make a change to the traditional work week, I think is really exciting. And there's certainly other countries that have implemented various iterations of this. What I wanted to give you 2 very specific examples today. The first example I want to share is, and this person is probably one of, the key people who's a spokesperson on the benefits of this 4-day work week. It's a gentleman by the name of Andrew Barnes, and he is also based out of New Zealand, or he was at the time he implemented this. He was working with a New Zealand company called Perpetual Guardian. Now, he was in an executive position at this company, and he was looking at efficiencies and productivity, as most executives do. He's looking at how to measure productivity. He's looking at how to get the most out of his people. And what he found was that the teams, and Perpetual was not a small company. There was, I want to say, about 250 staff at the time that he was implementing and trialing and playing with this technique. He was finding that across the board, people were wasting a whole lot of time. And if you've worked in business for any length of time, you know that is just commonplace. Yes, they might be there 38 hours a week, but how many of those hours are your team actually productive? And also, if you're enforcing that productivity, consistently and really hammering it down and cracking the whip, so to speak, what's the culture like? Probably not great. And what Andrew found was that at Perpetual Guardian, there was a whole lot of time wasting going on. And it happens everywhere. This is not an isolated situation that only happened at that organisation. If you looked at any business, there is lag time. There is time that is simply not productive. If you're in a business where you're charging out your staff based on their productive time, billable time with their client, things like accounting firms, legal firms, all do this, there's a percentage of their time that you expect them to be not dollar producing, not productive, so to speak. So we all acknowledge that it happens, but yet we still persist with this whole, but you've got to be there 5 days a week, even if you're not productive for probably what is a sum of about a day a week. And this is where the concept came from. So what Andrew Barnes did is he looked at how he could make a change, and he set out of curiosity. He'd done some reading on this concept of the 4-day work week. He'd seen it work overseas and thought, could this work here? So, and I think this is an important note to make. This was a trial. This was an exercise in curiosity. And I think if anyone's considering approaching or considering this as a possible approach in their business, I think that's so important as well. You really need to approach it with a mindset of curiosity, because what works in one place may not work in another. And that's why I want to share these two examples with you. Now, in the case of Perpetual Guardian, what they did is they firstly spoke to their staff and said, hey, we're thinking of trialing this, but in order for it to work, we would need to be able to measure your productivity. So rather than knowing that they're in attendance 38 hours a week, what they wanted to know is, in your 38-hour week or your normal full-time week, how do we measure your productivity? So as things stand now, how do we measure whether or not you're getting done what you need to get done? And this is a critical element to making any change like this in your workplace. And I think COVID has been a friend to us in this, because we all had to very quickly shift to working from in-office to remote work. And if you couldn't measure productivity, you had to figure it out pretty quickly, that's for sure. So you have to be able to measure that productivity. And he recognized that early on and set out to understand how he could measure productivity. Now, this was not a business that made production units. There wasn't a way to measure, right, we need to make 300 of these today. This was a business like most of our businesses where we have to really think about what productivity looks like. And then, of course, he gave his staff the chance to opt in. He didn't force this upon everyone, because, let's face it, some people actually like to be at work 5 days a week. It's a break from home or whatever it is. They enjoy that social connection that work offers. So it was an opt-in situation, and they trialled it. And here is what they found. They found it to be so successful after an original several-month trial period that they implemented it on a permanent basis. Now, Andrew's approach was, he worked on a 100-80-100 rule. What that means is this: the employees would get 100% of their salary, so their financial incentives would not change. They would only be required to attend the workplace 80% of the time, provided that they met 100% of their productivity objectives. If they weren't meeting that productivity, they had to be in the office full time. But what he found was people met their productivity. Not only did they meet it, productivity improved. Now, he gave his staff a choice as to how they would implement this 80%. So some people chose to work 5 days but shorter hours. They could be there for the kids' pickup at school or not miss the afternoon sports events. Other people chose to take a day off a week. So there was a lot of flexibility, and that won't work for everyone, I understand that. But in this case, this is how they approached it. The results are staggering. What they found ultimately was that engagement, so employee engagement, they did surveys, they were asking the team, improved by 40%. That is a massive increase in engagement. And we've spoken here on How to HR before about the impacts that engagement has on productivity, profitability, bottom line results, culture, all of those things. Their business's profitability, so we're talking now bottom line results, by having staff work only 80% of their time, but still keeping them 100% accountable, profitability increased by more than 12%. Now, that is not something to shy away from. That is a great result. And of course, they also saw other things. They saw improved productivity. They saw reduced stress levels in the staff, and the staff really embraced it. Now, in the end, they had about 75 to 85% of their team opt in to this new working arrangement, but they still had those that didn't want to. Now, of course, they had some various rules in place because this productivity element was so important. And one of the things is when new team members join them, they do have to work 5 days a week for a period of time, to indoctrinate them into the culture and to make sure they understand how the productivity measures work and all of those things. But I think that is a staggering result. And he now speaks publicly and very constantly about how he truly believes this is a technique many businesses should be using and the great results he believes businesses can get from that. Now, I understand that his approach is pretty flexible, and many of you will be saying that is never going to work in my business. And I want to challenge you to really think about how it could work. Because if you're going to see a productivity increase by having people work less hours, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have a happier team, more motivated team. You're going to be able to attract and retain better quality applicants. And if you're in a market where that's hard to do, this is something you should definitely be thinking about. Let me give you another example. There's a tech company based in Melbourne here in Australia known as Versa. And they also wanted to trial a 4-day work week option. Now, they approached it a little bit differently to Perpetual Guardian in that they didn't use that 100-80-100 rule. Instead, what they did is that they restructured their staff's hours so that they were working their full-time hours, but over a 4-day week. Now, their aim in this case was to improve staff mental health, reduce stress. They're in a market and an industry where attracting and retaining top talent is really important to them. So this was really something that their executive team took on as a staff wellness policy as much as anything. And we're actually quite happy to take a hit if productivity or even profitability didn't soar as a result. But they found exactly the opposite. So what they did is there is a common day every week, let's say a Wednesday, I'm not sure exactly what day they use, where there are no meetings, no one's required to be at work, no one's required to do any, deliverables. They work the other 4 days and that's where all the meetings and all the deliverables need to happen. They found not only did it, do the mental health objective of improving team morale, mental health, reducing stress and all those things, they saw a huge drop in absenteeism. Absenteeism costs businesses lots of money each and every year. That plummeted and profits soared. They had a much more engaged team. And again, in their case, they were able to attract and retain top quality talent, which in their market, in their industry, was really important to them. So that's a very different example. But again, it's just about being curious and considering how this might work for your business. Now, obviously questions come up like, well, that wouldn't work for my industry because we have a factory and we need to get production happening all the time. Sure, that's a different approach. And maybe it means a higher headcount in order to be able to reduce the hours of every employee. But it's a wide known fact that employees that work too many hours decrease productivity. The more hours they work, the less productive they are. So just by having an employee work more hours does not equate to productivity. So I find this really fascinating, and I would encourage you all to consider whether this could be a fit for your business or how you could approach something similar in order to see your productivity increase. In order for that to happen, I think there's 3 core ingredients you want to be looking at. The first is you must be able to measure productivity rather than attendance. And if you're not already doing that, that's the first place to start, because until you can effectively measure productivity for every position, then this is going to be a tough challenge for you to really see through to the end. Secondly, you must have trust within your teams and trust between your team members, between leadership and the team. You must have a culture that's built on trust. If you're not going to trust that people are going to get things done and they can't trust each other to get things done, this is going to become unhinged very, very quickly. So you must have a culture embedded in trust. And thirdly, you really do need to trial and consult. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach for all businesses, but it is absolutely something where it's possible for you to create it in a way that's really going to work for your business. So that is it. That's a wrap for this week's How to HR. I hope that's got the creative juices thinking. I really do think there is something in this concept that many businesses could benefit from, and it does require really switching up our thinking into a new way of approaching the world of work, but nothing's impossible. So if you trial this and if you give it a go, I would love to hear from you. Please let us know here in Facebook or pop a comment over on YouTube. Let us know what you trialed, let us know how it went, and let us know the results that you succeeded with. That's it from me for today. Thanks so much for joining me here on How to HR. I'll be back again next Thursday for our next episode. Until then, have a fabulous week and take care.